to this topic was an independent, MGTOW journal, the kind of pros and cons, how that might work. And this is something which we've been discussing. There's been a lot of very, very lively discussion within MGTOW.co. So,
oh yeah, I just want what I didn't actually get to tell you before we started was that I got a lot of interest from people outside of MGTOW on the same subject. A number of MRAs and an anti-feminist actually contacted me about this, and he said, "This is if we're going to actually break out and have any kind of influence, we need to be taken seriously." And the word that was used, what struck me the most, was the word manosphere, meaning every man in the sphere, not just MGTOW, not just MRAs, but people who are fighting, men that are fighting feminism as well. So, yeah, it could take a whole different direction, and we didn't. And at first, we just wanted to present something as an idea and get feedback. But I just wanted to let everybody know that the whole manosphere is interested in this product, this process, and it may take on the form of being the voice of the opposition, the academic voice. And we'll get into that in a minute.
Oh, no, I agree. And I certainly think it's a good idea. I mean, one of the things, for example, that I posted in MGTOW.co was, because I've owned journals in the past, academic medical journals. And it's an incredible amount of work, the team of editors and sub-editors and copy editors and proofreaders and, graphic design specialists and marketers. And, it's a very, very labor-intensive occupation. So maybe
very corrupt.
Hopelessly.
So corrupt. Yeah.
But I guess maybe the first thing that I'd love to maybe just have you speak on, if it's okay, is what's the rationale for a medical journal? Or for a scientific journal to discuss men's issues?
Oh, well, what it takes is articles at least 12 articles printed that do not have any errors in them at all. Something of being thoroughly looked through, but when we get into the corruption of the industry, the only way we're going to get a voice is if we do this. And that is going to be, say, the conservatism and stuff like that. Will be greatly interested in that. The war we're fighting right now as academics is the academics are SJWs and feminists. And somebody asked us last time we spoke on this, how do you avoid this in these industries? And I said, look, avoid them as much as possible, get out from underneath SJWs, but I didn't mention this process, this idea then was because I wanted to have a more formal platform, as well as having a lot of other people tell me if I'm wrong or it's stupid, all the rest of it, or it won't work. And overwhelmingly at this time I've only had one voice what said, I don't think it'll work. And I asked that person why, and they just said feminism. And I went, okay, feminism what? End of conversation. But everybody else said this here is the way to avoid the influence of the mainstream the mainstream Illuminati of the academic world that you don't want to go against. This is the only way to do it, is to print people who have contrary views in a way that cannot be just dismissed. At the moment, it can be just dismissed. But
agreed.
If somebody, yeah.
No, I think you're completely right, and that's the issue that I see, which really has, I guess, helped shape my thinking in terms of possibly needing an academic, journal in this area, and that is that a lot of the evidence that we base our theories on, so for example, the Zooish has just pointed out, evolutionary biology, evolutionary psychology. Yep. Some of it is put out there in medical journals, but we tend to take this information, combine it with information from other sources, such as, let's say, history, biology or whatever, and then we tend to make inferences from this data. And at the moment, it's a very, very challenging thing to do, simply because, obviously somebody will say, citation needed, and we're having to necessarily do this because this area of research isn't. It's not only not particularly popular, that there just simply aren't a lot of individuals who have an interest in really understanding the social implications of sex differences. I mean, obviously within MGTOW, we may consider it important because it provides us a lot of the rationale, for going one's own way.
We are seeing a few voices, and what they've done is, the ones that we have, at least 3 of them, they've managed to circumvent the system ways. One, what they did to prove that men were treated differently than women under normal conditions was to investigate how police officers responded to crimes. And they did a study on that. That'll be in the link in the description. There's the other one, a woman, she put there was a lot of people who helped with the documentation of this, and they were all men. So they Josie put her name on the top of it and used her woman card to get it in. And this one's called, where does social science need different political views? And she managed to cover all these really touchy subjects under, what would you say, the deception of being PC. And yeah, it got through, and obviously a lot of people passed it through because they were sympathetic to the cause. And that comes to one of our points, is there an actual need for it? And when the reason why we do need this is the simple fact that Josie she had to use a woman card and cross her fingers to get her work published in brain and cognitive science. I believe with it, brain and cognitive science, behavioral science, that's the one, brain and behavioral science, through basically being a chameleon. So is there any better reason to have an independent journal? I think so. And
Agreed.
The reason why that is because of corruption by censorship. Now,
I think you've raised a huge issue there, the corruption by censorship. And just to explain how that works. So
I do. There is a reference as well. No, I was just going to say for everybody, there's a reference here. If you're very skillful, you can put it in now, but that'll be underneath later. And these references are the basis for the descriptors up here. Says link in description. So you will be able to check out those references will back up these claims. So you'll have evidence, and that hopefully will stop the dissenters from the naysayers from saying that we're talking out of our ass. I suppose we have our references there, if you want to dispute what we're saying, you need to read that reference. If you don't believe it for real, you read that reference and you see what's happening in the academic world. And there should be 4 of them. What will give you a whole understanding of what's going on once you read those sources. So you don't really need to know exactly what's going on right now either. And all of our claims will be backed up by those references.
Agreed.
And I just thought they needed to be thrown out there. Unfortunately, Tilde used one of mine before I could. Before I got to use this one, Josie's, her article came out in behavioural science, and I thought this is perfect. And then Tilde did one of he didn't actually put a link in there for the to get it for free because it's behind a paywall. But I won't say how, but there's a way of circumventing that. You'll be able to hit the link and you'll be able to go straight there and read it, and it's outlined and it shows you the whole huge, all of our points, the reason why we need the corruption, everything all in one article, and it'll blow your mind, especially because she doesn't write like everything else we've read, all the opposition, stuff that's come out. And it's so refreshing. It's just, I don't know why they haven't taken it down, but it's probably likely that they can't actually attack the science of it. And that is point 1. To protect ourselves from this is to be unable to be criticised in our position and our points of view. And that's what's probably the most important thing that we'll cover here, that to get away from the mainstream, you have to be, how would you say, uncriticisable.
Well,
you can't give them an inch.
Yeah, we have to have a position based on evidence, and there ought to be a place to publish such a position. Now, a lot of the corruption that I see in the peer review process often isn't a case of individuals getting together and colluding. So maybe corruption's it doesn't quite capture the nuance of it. It's that individuals... the corruption still stands. Simply the article that I have here, the scholarly kitchen one, it's not actual... you mean the case with eLife and PubMed? Yeah, no, that was outright corruption. That was full-on skullduggery. Full-on.
Yeah, well, basically, they got to pay their way into accepted journal. As an accepted journal, instead of going through the process, they just paid for it.
Well, that's the thing, though. PubMed have been doing that. I know personally the guy who runs the Scholarly Kitchen. I mean, it's the publishing community is such a small world. So you literally know everyone.
Or anybody what'll comment on these corruptions is a small world. Anybody supporting them, that's all you get. Reams of the shit, and it's like toilet paper.
Exactly. Well, the issue is that. Just to kind of explain to people who maybe don't have a lot of experience with journals, to get the best submissions in a journal. So to persuade an author to submit their best work to you, not just a review article, but original, research to you that's going to be highly cited. The journal needs to be indexed in PubMed. If it's not indexed in PubMed, you're not going to get their best work. Before you get an indexing in PubMed, you also need to have an impact factor. So for years and years and years, most journals struggle because people won't submit their best work to you because it's not going to be cited because it's not searchable on PubMed. But what PubMed are doing, and this is just the outright corruption, is that if you're friends with them, you're able to get your journals in. And of course, if the journals have the right kind of political leaning, so if you're basically a rabid feminist, you get all of your journals in. And if the journals don't say things they think are accurate, however evidence-based those things are, you cannot get your journal in PubMed.
Oh,
So
right.
the peer review processes. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, I just forgot the exact journal. But one scholar has been basically indexing his stuff on Google Scholar and going through them independently, and he's actually doing really, really well now. Google Scholar is another option. You do get indexed, but you don't get the same kind of prestige you get with PubMed. But the way PubMed is right now, even the people what like PubMed are just disgusted by their behavior and the fact that they'll print things by feminists. They actually, PubMed just recently, I believe it was 74 articles they had to retract because they were shown to be false.
Yeah, so that's just the beginning.
Yeah, well, they found it because they went after this was found out that one particular SJW had actually made up a complete experiment without and made up the data. You know, they've gone once they found that out, they've gone, oh, we better take a look at these particular sciences, so SJW feminist stuff. So they said, why don't we go through psychology and sociology and see how it stands up. 70% of psychological articles and experiments were able to be replicated. And in sociology, where feminism is and social justice is, 30%, 70% of their stuff was pure bunk. It could not be replicated.
Well, it's the reproducibility crisis, and it's a huge issue. I mean, one of the things you also pointed out, which I think is completely valid, is that there is a suppression of independent thought because of the peer review process, because of the PubMed process, and also just the political climate we have. We don't have a political climate where you can point out things like sex differences. You can't point out that men make up at a minimum half of the domestic abuse victims, and you cannot publish research to that effect. So, and as you pointed out in our kind of interaction, there is a real suppression of independent thought, and what might be needed to counteract this is a journal set up very, very specifically to address the difficult issues that we see around us, and that is that something to the effect of the journal of primate sex differences.
I just called it for now the project. I just went with Liberatum. People liked it. It just was it was Latin for liberator, and everybody liked the idea because there's a lot of other people who actually just sent small messages saying, I've got valid research, and they won't print it in any of the journals, even the ones that were more conservative leaning and stuff like that. There's another reference coming up soon where this guy researched about 9 different things, and he did experimentation over, I think it was 10 years worth of experimentation to back up his claims, and none of them printed any of his research because it wasn't PC. He was a man who literally pioneered the investigation between intelligence and dimorphic species and hominids, and then in actual human beings. He went through a whole series of experiments whereby he was able to increase the intelligence levels of retarded children by giving them different types of hormones. And they said, no, we're never going to print this. And you'll find him on Wikipedia and read more. But basically, he was a man who pioneered the whole thing that women were different than men. And he wasn't, I think he was suppressed for 17 years before they agreed that his research was actually, they were willing to accept that it was valid. And when we look at this guy, this Kevin Hall guy, he was very famous on on television because of The Biggest Loser. So he carried out an experiment paid by The Biggest Loser to look at the health needs, and what was happening, within the people losing weight, right? Now, this guy already had an idea what he was going to say. He already had a conclusion before he even started. And it had to do with diabetes and the production of insulin and how that affects fat retention. And he did all this experiment data and stuff like this, and he came to the incorrect conclusion. His actual statistics, what he wrote out in his journal, literally showed the opposite. But no one even peer-reviewed his journal because it was such a big PR boost to them. Because he was famous, they printed him even without even looking over his work. And this is a peer review corruption. Is if
Absolutely.
they're going, if somebody famous, they'll just get printed without scrutiny because it's
Exactly.
money.
And that also happens during a double-blind peer review. So I guess one of the things that was brought in, the innovation in the peer review process, was that we're going to double-blind it, so the reviewer won't know the identity of the authors and vice versa. However, I mean, that process itself is absurd because at a certain level, so let's say, for example, you take a topic like non-small cell lung cancer, and you're discussing immunotherapy for non-small cell lung cancer. I know there's 30 people in the world who are competent enough and who run the clinical trials to write about immunotherapy for non-small cell lung cancer. So I know it's going to be one of them. I will know by the citations who it is very, very quickly just by reading the essentially just by reading the citations, because I know, for example, that most authors statistically are more likely to engage in self-citation. So they're going to cite all of their work, they're going to cite the work of people in their own faculty. So the kind of double-blind peer review process is almost absurd. I mean, so without the actual corruption of peer review itself, you immediately know who's submitting a paper, and you're right. It's a popularity contest. It's I want to have this guy's work published because he's also citing all of my work, and that's what tends to happen with the peer review.
Yes, definitely within organisations. Some journals will have just a list, of people that they always keep on contacting for their revisions and their peer review. And what happens there is they, get far too familiar to each other, and it breaks down objectivity. And this is where we see the PC censorship come in. We see people citing each other, and then, he's cited my work. Oh yeah, big tick on the whole peer review process, without actually looking at the work. And this happens in large amounts in social justice spheres of sociology and feminism, to the point that they'll print anything a feminist writes. As I've said before, as long as the feminist hasn't submitted it, in finger paints, they will just print it straight away because they all cite each other. They all are to the narrative-based publishing handicap, as I call it, against free thought. Because if someone disagrees with them, they instantly strike against, you are a enemy, you are a traitor to the cause.
Well, it's a clique. It's the academic industry is a clique, and independent thought is certainly not tolerated. And those individuals find their careers ruined. They're certainly never going to get published. And the culture is a publish or perish culture. So if you're not being if you're not being published, you're not going to get tenure, and you're not going to be published if you publish, or if you attempt to publish the type of things which go against the narrative. So
absolutely.
And
that's what happened to Wilhelm. The citation here for Wikipedia, if you have a look at this Wilhelm guy, he was the first guy to pioneer intelligence in human dimorphism, and he was restricted from even holding academic positions just because he was doing this research, let alone getting printed for something that actually they had to concede that was true in the end. That guy's life is totally tragic, and it shows the landscape that academics are in at the moment. Anybody has a dissenting opinion, if this guy was criticized literally on the point of, you're not saying women and men are the same. That was the only reason they persecuted him for it, was because the PC, or the paradigm at that stage, the narrative was that men and female are identical. There's no difference.
Exactly.
So this man was persecuted for about 17 years for saying that. But at the same time, of course, a woman named Koss over at the CDC was adding lesbian relationship domestic violence to the tally of men's violence against women in domestic violence. For 15 years she did that. Well, this guy was living in a hut,
Well, the CDC does have a history of that type of skullduggery and just outright fraud, not only in the research they put together, but also in the papers they publish. I'm deeply mistrustful of the CDC, and I think part of the reason is because, first and foremost, the CDC is a political animal. So it's actually part. I don't know if a lot of people know this, but it's not a research center. First and foremost, it's part of the U.S. military.
Yeah,
it's actually part of the U.S. military.
Yeah, they're linked into all of them actually. Some of the intelligence agencies as well, but the most, I suppose, the most dramatic example of this is the rape laws in the FBI. They were facilitated by Koss and the CDC, and this is the reason why the FBI have the definition of rape the way it is, and they lobbied that over and over again with the help of WOW, the women's organisation, to not have that definition of rape, where only men can rape, according to the FBI. I believe they changed it now, but for that period, the FBI could only prosecute men with rape, and that was because of Koss, the CD, and the CDC. So that's just some history there. That's how serious the stakes are. That literally the CDC stopped the FBI from prosecuting women for rape because of the politics within the structure and how much power this woman had. Literally, if a lesbian hit her partner was the victim of a male for 15 years.
It's all the patriarchy.
And she still got a job.
Sure.
That's how corrupt it is.
So I guess one of the things that I would love to put out there is this, that, again, this is, at this stage, it's an idea that we're mulling over at MGTOW.co. I would love if everybody would join the discussion there and just, add your 2 cents, If anybody would be interested in volunteering time for this, I certainly can volunteer time. I know Cheeky's interested. We've got a couple of other guys like Socrates, who's interested. So if anybody has possibly, copy editing experience, journal layouts experience, or graphic design experience,
or even an opinion.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So please join the discussion there because I think it's an important one. Another thing that I would love to just kind of maybe put out there before we kind of continue this discussion is that in these regular Sunday discussions that we have, and and I have with other persons from MGTOW outside of MGTOW on my channel, please do feel free to join the discussion. And what I mean is that if you have a microphone and you want to call in, so to speak, just let me know in the description bar. Just say, look, I agree or I disagree, and I'd like to join the discussion. We'll bring you in for 5 minutes, but because I would love this to be interactive. I certainly don't have a monopoly on that. So if you want to come in to either face down myself or or Cheeky or anybody who's joining us, please feel free to, because you may have a position which is simply based on sound or evidence. Absolutely, absolutely. So please feel free. Just let me know in the description. What will happen is that I'll send you a link, and you'll be able to join for 5-10 minutes, and then we'll have at it and see where we get to. So so I guess maybe the final thing that I'd love to maybe kind of ask just on this topic is how would one, in your opinion, go about starting this process? Let's say we had 10 volunteers in total who are willing to give maybe 2 hours a month in total. What's the process for potentially getting this started?
Well, we get. The thing is, this slide was only about how much need there was for a journal for this, because of the political climate. It's all the left and the extreme left in psychology academics, and most of the academics we know. The reference there is for that woman's article. What she did, she discusses all of the process and what she had to go through as a conservative in the psychology field, and how she was suppressed from dissenting opinions, because they had her job in their hands, and that the peer review research needs to be handled by equal numbers of political people. And when we go to the how to start up a journal thing, you got to get a whole heap of submissions. That's not a problem at this stage. Once we get enough, and we publish at least 12, because that's the absolute minimum. We can actually do things like petition actual universities to do peer review in different positions within the universities, because it's very important for their lecturers as you said, publish or die, and it's important for their professors to get acknowledgement for some sort of academic work. So a lot of coordination involved there. So, but you wouldn't need exactly to be an academic to do that. So, that's not ideally necessary, but you certainly do need people who have interest or experience in the academic procedure to pick up on things that were not picked up from other peer reviewers. As you already know, you did the editing for a journal, CS?
Yes, absolutely. I have done, but I've owned journals, and I've also, before I owned journals, I've worked as an academic medical editor. So been the managing editor of multiple publications.
So you would know more than anybody kind of what's needed and involved in that area. So what are your thoughts?
Well, I agree. So I think the first point of call would be to essentially have a discussion with PubMed to ask them, are there any changes to their parameters for inclusion? And quite simply,
the 12 articles, and those articles have to be without errors.
Agreed.
Before they'll even look at them.
But I think it goes beyond. So there's a guy there, Chris Kelly, for example. So I mean, some of the guys that I know at PubMed. So I'd have dialogue with them because it goes past just the number of articles and the quality. It really needs to be pitched to them. PubMed now operate as a law unto themselves. So now it's more about making friends with them, and it needs to be pitched to them. And then recruiting a board, a separate advisory board and a separate editorial board. And the editorial board, if possible, should comprise of individuals who sit on the PubMed and Medline decision-making committee for journal inclusion. So if you have 3 or 4 individuals like that, there's just a far better chance of it then being included. And once it's in PubMed, the journal's then a force within a couple of years. It gets an impact factor, and then it's something very, very powerful. And maybe
it's very hard though to get them to go with independent journals, especially ones that are going to print things that aren't narrative friendly. And I think that's our biggest hurdle, isn't it? I mean, but I do bring up the Google thing again. They have a larger reach than even PubMed, but
it's the credibility.
It's more of a student. Yeah, it's a credibility thing. But I think that if we are consistently careful and consistently honest, I believe that people will come to us anyway. And I don't think there's going to be any end of submissions, that's for sure, because there's a lot of conservatives that are terrified of actually presenting their research to their peers. They know that they're just going to get done. Just like Josie here, who had to go out of her way to get this. She even had to put her name on the top of it just so it would get considered. And all it goes into is the politics themselves. That anything that there's one conservative to I think it was like 15 or even 30 liberals who all of them were social justice warriors. And she said, this is damaging science. And she said, this is damaging science, yeah. She managed to get that published, so that's out there now, and I think that's one of our ins, personally. I definitely would like to get other people's opinions on that. And I think one of the things we have to do as MGTOW as well is to be far more dedicated than what other writers have to be to avoid criticism. because they will go through us with a fine-tooth comb, finding the smallest error. You know, oh, that doesn't have a full stop. You know, no, just can't be printed. I did. Unfortunately, I have seen a few errors lately in some more academic talk within MGTOW, and that's why I wanted to suggest something to those who are doing academic work within MGTOW, and there's more than what you think, actually. The main errors were the strength of effect size and the exaggeration of validity and what those exaggeration of variance has been two mistakes that I've come over, and that's why I want to suggest this book to anybody who wants to sort of start in the MGTOW community academics and make a difference for all men. That's what you're doing. You're doing a service to men by doing this. It's not about us. It's about our fellow men. And I would like to suggest Alan Peters here. That's a collectible, actually, that book, because it walks you through statistical analysis that you need for behavioral science and health sciences. And it's basically like the kindergarten version, the ABC version of statistical analysis, that's so accurate that it's a collector's item now. That the book was bought, originally I bought mine for about $15, right? And it's worth $72 now.
Wow.
That's how highly sought after this book is. That's how accurate it is. And you don't even need to know or understand the metrics that you're using with this book. He explains what is necessary, what you need to do this, what makes this important, what made the variables, what you have to look out for, everything laid out for you. You could basically be a beginner and pick up this book and just start statistical analysis within 10 minutes of picking up the book. And that's what makes it so fantastic, is you don't have to be a genius in statistics, because this book actually tells you, oh, geez, this is the most often mistake. People mistake this, and other books don't do that. They just don't. Just look out for this, you know, and what exactly certain terms mean, you know, like effect size. It doesn't say this is how much of a particular population believes this way. It's a likelihood of a certain percentage of that population.
Exactly.
And I think
so how much of the data can be explained? So how much of this correlation can be explained by the data?
Well, it's more than that as well. That's what I'm saying. The basics are there. You have a basic understanding of that. There are more, how would you say, more advanced concepts around the simple statistical analysis is what we do. And this guy shows you how to not make those mistakes. Exactly. So he's fantastic. And there is, he does some other books that are more modern, and anybody who wants to do statistical analysis, I suggest you get the SPA-SW or whatever. Anyway, it's the new version of SPSS. That is a stronger statistic engine, and it'll do all your work for you. If you are a lazy bugger, this program will do it all for you, and this guy will tell you if you made a mistake and what not to make a mistake with. And I thought I might add a couple more there, that if you can't actually find those particular books, these are general backups. If you can't afford one at all, there's a free book made by SPSS, a couple of years old now. for doing that statistical analysis, because people have made small errors, but in the community of people who do know the more advanced ideas of statistics go, oh God, these amateurs again. I've already found at least one video criticizing something I said as well, and he was right about it too. So I think we need all these things in place. But what I don't agree on with all the others is that I believe anybody with intelligence has the capability of creating an experiment, carrying out that experiment, and accurately documenting the results. And these people, anybody can do it who has a motive, free time to do it. And that's where they're closing them all off. If you don't have a degree, like I walk into a place, I've got 3 degrees, people talk, they listen to me when I talk, but they shouldn't. They should basically say, okay, this guy is experienced, he has multiple degrees, but they should say, let's hear him talk first. And I believe people who don't even have an academic degree can add to science. And this is one of the things I want to establish in a journal is people who don't have a degree that deserve being published. And there's heaps of MGTOWs and a number of MRAs that won't get published. They're out there and they're worthwhile people to get published, and then nobody will ever take them seriously. And I think that's my driving force. You can hear my passion in that. That anybody can do real science, my friend, if you have the right tools. And now you have them if you watch this. And we want this journal, so come in, tell us what we need to do. We want to hear your views and everybody's views. And I don't care if someone completely destroys everything I've said, as long as they've got evidence behind it. I will go with the flow. If you're right, I want to know your opinion. I most certainly, if you're talking to me, I will never dismiss you just because you don't hold the same view as me. I will never dismiss you because you don't have degrees, and I won't dismiss your ideas if you don't have evidence. If you have evidence to back it, I will give you every credit and change my point of view. So never be afraid at all, with me at least, of saying your mind. I will not dismiss you. That's my cheeky guarantee. Now vote for me for president. No. But yeah, I want everybody to feel very comfortable talking to me. Especially pointing out my faults. And faults with where we're going with this. So I'll let other people talk now.
That's good. So guys, please do join the discussion at MGTOW.co, and the journal will be, if it gets off the ground, that is, it's going to be discussing both the abstracts, ethics, the science behind things. So it's going to be an all-encompassing project if it gets off the ground. And also, just kind of going back to what we discussed.